The intervention process. What are interventions? Interventions are specific activities that result from the forces of diagnosis and feedback. Intervention is a procedure that an organizational development consultant uses after diagnosing an organizational situation and providing feedback to managers to address identified problems. Intervention is any event directed towards improving organizational effectiveness that disrupts an organization's normal way of operating. Interventions can involve consultants from outside the organization, but may also be performed by managers itself. Intervention can also be thought of as a process which, as a practitioner, follows. Intervention can also be thought of as a process which a practitioner would follow. The first step would be for a practitioner to consider the values that are the foundation of the organization's development. Secondly, he or she would implement a set of assumptions about individuals, groups, and organizations and how they operate. Thirdly, the practitioner would set goals for the organization. And finally, he or she would prescribe a variety of structural activities and techniques to assist them in reaching their goal. Classifying interventions. Intervention can be directed towards any level of the organization from hourly workers to top executives. In terms of classifications, interventions are classified by the area where the intervention is directed. The earliest approach to classifying intervention was the OD cube, where the appropriate mode of intervention ranged from training to technostructural activity, depending on the specific issues. In more recent times, classifications of intervention is largely an expansion of the original cube, listing over 70 possible interventions directed at 5 different levels across 4 complex systems that occur in organizations. Organizing interventions at the individual level can take the form of changes in performance, appraisal, or incentive systems. On the interpersonal level, the focus is often on clarifying roles and expectations among workers. Group interventions, such as quality circles, for example, are frequently directed towards processes by which decisions are made. Intergroup interventions typically involve designing ways for different groups within the organization to work together more efficiently. Essentially, at the organizational level, interventions focus on strategies and system-wide change. Social factors intervention have the goal of changing individual behavior. Technology interventions are not only just about the technology, but about the people that operate them and the issues that might occur in that sort of environment. The organization development version of intervention theory was established by Chris Arias in the 1970s. Crucial to the theory is the belief that intervention should strive towards assisting organizations in learning how to solve its own problems. The intervention theory dictates that there are 3 requirements for an intervention to be successful. The first is that the intervener must have a valid and useful information base about the organization and its members. Interveners should be able to develop hypotheses about the organization that are subsequently examined. Secondly, for a successful intervention, free choice is necessary. This means that the organization can choose from a variety of courses of action. Within this, interveners must resist the pressure to prescribe and give in to anxieties of their clients. Finally, there must be an internal commitment, meaning that participants in the intervention agree on the course of action and feel ownership and responsibility for its outcomes. Intervention theory also emphasizes scientific research. Interveners should be aware of the discrepancies between their views and those of the clients, particularly with regards to beliefs about people and the way to implement change, as well as when there's conflict between intervener's ideals and his or her performance in the workplace. These are crucial towards intervention, as intervention is not a straightforward practice, but rather it is a studied application dependent upon environments and factors within an organization.
As mentioned before, the practice of OD intervention is rather complex, as different situations, organizations, and people call for different approaches and methods of intervention. Within the process of intervention, the concept of depth, which was coined by Roger Harrison, plays quite a significant role. Depth is a result of accessibility and individuality. Where there is less depth, an intervention will involve information that is publicly accessible. When an intervention is considered deep, it involves knowledge that is private and less accessible. As such, interventions that are less deep will target broader organizational change, and deep interventions will aim for individual change. Outplacement, where workers are helped to assess their own talents and limitations, is an example of deep intervention. As well, team buildings, where members confront such things as their personal motivations and how they deal with conflict, is also an example of deep intervention. When choosing the depth of an intervention, a variety of factors come into play. First, a consultant needs to be assured that the intervention under consideration holds a highly potential rate of being successful in solving the organization's problems. Secondly, the intervener must evaluate themselves and make certain that they are able to be competent at working at the level that is required of them. Finally, the intervener needs to determine the level at which organizational employees or members are comfortable working. These are all steps at making sure an intervention is successful and valuable. As I'm sure you have grasped thus far, introducing change into an organization is rather complex, poses many challenges, and involves many factors at various levels of the organization. Therefore, an intervention holds a higher potential of attaining success when conditions allow for flexibility to ease the process of change, quick action, which is crucial to the process as it prevents the loss of information, intensive care, as the intervention is bound to create controversy that will require the intervener to handle and cope with in a delicate manner, and connectedness, meaning that others will need to consider the impact of change on their fellow colleagues. These conditions I have just listed are dependent on the skills and personal qualities of the intervener and the attitudes of the organizational members as well as the organization's environment. Additionally, for success, empowerment, where workers are given the capacity and the authority to take action to solve organizational problems, largely facilitates the introduction of change. Empowered workers believe they can solve problems, they take responsibilities for their actions, and they have adequate resources to address their problems. In most organizations, empowered workers are usually not that easy to find, as many do not take it upon themselves. Additionally, in order to make an intervention successful, over-control must be avoided. Because when organizations have too many policies and procedures, effective action is hindered, and it also prevents workers from taking on initiative.